In Vulnerability in Resistance, editors Judith Butler, Zeynep Gambetti, and Leticia Sabsay explore the intricate relationship between vulnerability and resistance. They assert that acknowledging vulnerability and resistance as interconnected concepts involves embracing claims that are both risky and true. The emergence of the suffering other in social relations is highlighted, with vulnerability seen as a process exacerbated and disavowed for the pursuit of power. The editors emphasize the heightened vulnerability of socially disadvantaged groups, such as disabled individuals, when relying on paternalistic institutions for protection. The central question posed is how to politically address vulnerability in resistance, particularly through corporeal strategies targeting these institutions, especially in times of neoliberal austerity. Judith Butler, in the opening chapter titled Rethinking Vulnerability and Resistance, delves into the concept of precarity. She challenges the assumed linear sequence of vulnerability followed by resistance, emphasizing the interplay between vulnerability and resistance in the context of space and infrastructure. Butler argues that understanding bodily vulnerability requires considering the social and material conditions, drawing parallels with disability studies. Linguistic vulnerability is also explored, demonstrating how performativity exposes individuals to discourses beyond their control. Sarah Brack, in Bouncing Back, Vulnerability and Resistance in Times of Resilience, critically examines the embodied concept of resilience as a cultural keyword in the face of neoliberalism. Resilience, she contends, not only signifies resistance, but also the ability to bounce back and survive in a neoliberal era, where it becomes a form of security against various threats. Brack warns against the ways resilience hinders the imagination of alternative futures, and explores the body's resistance to resilience. The subsequent chapters explore corporealities and their connections to disability studies. Mary Ann Hirsch, in Vulnerable Times, recounts her cultural and linguistic displacement, framing vulnerability through aesthetic encounters, and emphasizing the productivity of acts such as reading, looking, and listening. The book also delves into themes of natality and mortality, re-scripting womanhood, and critiquing citizenship. Zeynep Gambetti, in Rethinking Oneself and One's Identity, Agonism Revisited, uses Hannah Arendt's ideas to reflect on the Occupy Jeezy movement, challenging binaries between vulnerability and power, materiality, and discursivity. Other chapters, such as Barricades, Resources and Residues of Resistance, explore the metaphorical and monumental significance of barricades, and Women in Black discusses non-sovereign agency through public mourning. The exploration of vulnerability and resistance in the collection delves deeper into the body, raising critical questions about systemic violence, representation, civic participation, and political transgressions. In the 10th chapter, Meltem Ahiska examines how patriarchal violence sustains itself in the context of anti-violence campaigns, emphasizing the role of representations in reaffirming vulnerability as an inherent aspect of womanhood. Elsa Dorlin, in the 11th chapter, explores civic participation and the dynamics between the shown and the hidden in the allegories of Western citizenship, particularly focusing on the significance of the face in constructing subjectivity and citizenship. Elena Tselipis, in Vulnerable Corporealities and Precarious Belongings in Mona Hatam's Art, investigates how bodies are shaped by loss, displacement, and occupation through art. Rima Hamami, in Precarious Politics. The activism of bodies that count, aligning with those that don't, in Palestine's colonial frontier, examines gendered bodies coming together in resistance within colonial spaces. A notable departure in the collection is Nucket Sermon's chapter, When Antigone is a Man. Feminist Trouble in the Late Colony, which describes transgressive discourse between feminists from the Kurdish movement and second-wave style feminism in Istanbul. Sermon discusses gendered political practices and the vulnerability of individuals challenging state-sanctioned practices, illustrating the complexity of vulnerability when positioned outside accepted political norms. A unique perspective is presented in Elena Loizidou's chapter, Dreams and the Political Subject, which considers dreams as a politically viable force, and an integral part of political subjectivity. Loizidou argues that dreaming contributes to our political existence by accessing a sensual world, challenging theoretical landscapes that may overlook the political relevance of dreams. Throughout the collection, the overarching theme is the interplay between vulnerability and resistance, with a focus on corporeality and subjectivity. The editors argue that vulnerability is a resource that can be willingly exposed or claimed, giving rise to resistance through radical democratic practices. The authors advocate for linking corporeality and subjectivity, re-emphasizing vulnerability in resistance. The conclusion underscores the effective dimension of politics and the need for contestation in neoliberal times. However, the editors acknowledge that the critical insight into vulnerability might only scratch the surface, emphasizing the ongoing process of working through various aspects, such as the living and the dead, memories, barricades, and dreams. The collection challenges the binary relationship between vulnerability and resistance, urging a nuanced understanding that avoids reinforcing paternalistic power, especially concerning group identifications like those found in descriptions of disability. Overall, the collection prompts readers to consider vulnerability/resistance and their political implications in a nuanced and dynamic manner.